The story starts with a beautiful goddess named Visis. She used her powerful magic to summon her heroes, but these heroes were students, and they were summoned against their will because she saw great potential in them. However, there was a concern regarding the aptitude test that she gave to the students. The goddess then called out one student, whose name is Touka, and said that he would be disposed of. And her reason for summoning the students is for them to defeat the demon lord. Visis then added that among all the ranks Memori was placed in the lowest rank E. So now for their sake, he must be discarded. Memori couldn't believe her judgment, but he knew back in his class that he never had any good qualities for himself and that he had no leads in his time. He then told the goddess that her abrupt summoning wasn't just and then immediately declared to dispose of him. Memori then points at Visis' face and says to her that everyone she has summoned has likely suffered the same fate and will be thrown away once she decides if they're worthless. But then, his classmates started to completely ignore him as all of them stated that they were in safe ranks and away from the lowest position. Memori then fell to his knees after realizing that his classmates had already treated him as if he were a ghost. But all of a sudden, one girl stood out from the crowd and told the goddess to stop what she was doing. Sogu, the S-ranked hero, then tells Visis that she must understand the current situation and that it wasn't Memori's fault that he fell to the lowest rank. Memori then looks to her as his saving grace and hopes that their classmates will finally listen. But just as she tried to convince the students, the goddess appeared behind her and knocked her off her senses completely. After she fell to the ground, the heartless goddess suddenly cried and blamed Memori for merely existing as the rank E hero. One of his classmates then pulls him away from her and calls him a pervert. The rest of his classmates then looked down on him and said that they wouldn't be needing him. Memori looked helpless, as if moments ago they were simply classmates. The others then looked at him with disdain and turned their backs on him. And after seeing his classmates abandon him, Visis uses her powers and declares Memori to be disposed of. He breaks into tears as the goddess casts a spell and tells Memori that his death will not be in vain. It was a hopeless moment for Memori, but at that point, he snapped and flipped off the goddess and told her to shut up and go to hell. He vanishes completely, and after that, he wakes up in a large cave with no one else but himself. Memori was left in despair and broke into pieces after knowing that even his classmate wouldn't hesitate to abandon him. He then asks himself what he should do next. He remembers that he had skills, the skills that were distributed to them from the moment the goddess summoned them. He raised his arm, and it opened up a status panel. As the light shone on his face, a huge bull stood silently behind him. It then roared loudly and tried to grab him. Thankfully, he managed to dodge its attacks and escape. Memori continues to run, and in the distance, he sees a head peeking behind the rock. Memori thought that someone else was also disposed of and thought that maybe he could join forces with them, but as he got to the rock, his hope was nothing but a sitting pile of bones. Another hope has failed him yet again. The monster continues to approach him, and Memori knows he can't stop running now or else he'll end up like them. As he keeps on running, he pulls out his skills panel to see what skills he's got. His skills include paralysis, poison, and sleep. This is a total shock to him, as he couldn't figure out exactly what to do with his skills. He then learns the reason why the goddess wanted to abandon him from the start. But then, the monster has finally reached Memori and is about to grab him by the face. In an act of desperation, he raises his hand against the monster and casts the skill called Paralyze. He opens his eyes and sees that the monster is completely immobilized. Memori stood there and thought that if he could actually use the skills to his advantage in a situation where he could spend all the time he wanted, as long as the requirements were met, then there really wasn't much of an issue. Memori then casts his other spell, called Poison, and the monster's skin bubbles up and leaks fluids from its body. He doesn't know how long the effects will last, but he knows that he must understand how to use his skills. He took a step closer to the monster and stared right at it with his menacing eyes as it died from its poison. After waiting for about an hour, he receives a message telling him that his level just went up from level 1 to level 258, which is ridiculous. After that, he borrowed the dead man's coat. He can't promise that he'll take revenge for him, but one thing's for sure, Memori will fight on until he gives the goddess a taste of her own medicine. After killing the Minotaur, Memori progresses through the dungeon but is seen struggling as he paralyzes his way through the hordes of chicken-headed monsters. He gets exhausted as more and more of them keep coming. He laid down for a moment and thought about how he ended up in this place and blamed the goddess who abandoned him immediately after being summoned. But there's one thing he's realized: the monsters he has been killing aren't as strong as the Minotaur. After that, Memori receives a message telling him that he's leveled up, and according to the goddess, this whole system is programmed to be easily understandable with their world's knowledge. But then again, jumping from level 1 to 258 is outrageous. This clearly meant that Vices had no intention of letting anyone escape from the start. After a while, Memori stands back up again and hopes to get back at the goddess by smashing her head. He bids this hell farewell as he kills off each and every monster in front of him using the skill Poison. And as he blasted them repeatedly with poison, he took himself back to the time when he used to live with his parents. His father scolded him for being a disobedient child and told him to go outside the house. At that time, he thought to himself, if he had listened to his parents, maybe they would have appreciated him more. His mother then told her husband to open the door, but he didn't listen, and instead he told her that it's none of her business how they treat their child. And before he got beaten, his mother apologized to him. After that, Memori snapped as he looked at the monsters and thought that it was already too late for him to accept their apology. And now, it's about time he uses his paralyzed skill after it wears out. But before he could, he realized something. Since paralysis and poison work together, he thought of maybe using his third skill called Sleep. After casting the skill, all the monsters fell asleep while poison slowly killed them. Now that he has created a combo with his skills, after using the paralysis and poison, he could then stack it using his sleep skill to completely immobilize his target without even letting them move for a single moment. After that, Memori looked upon the monsters and thought of them as nothing but a walking pile of experience points. Now that he's figured out his skill, he could finally take his revenge on those who cast him out. Memori then swears to himself that he'll neutralize anyone who even dares to end his life as he sits atop the corpses of the monsters that became the victims of his suffering. After clearing the area, another notification alerts him saying that his skills have now leveled up from 1 to 2. After that, he stumbles upon a book with words written in an unknown language that tell him to be careful of the Soul Eater. He takes the book since it will provide him useful information. Memori borrows the rope from the old sage's remains. He opens a door from the safe room by using magic and is thinking how long he has been stuck in place while hurriedly looking for food since he is out of resources. Memori ends up in an ancient ruin that he has visited before. The place was man-made, including a safe room and an exit. He is using the place to farm for experience points so he can keep growing. The reason Memori is farming is because when he keeps repeatedly using his skills and sharpening his mastery, the things that he can do will increase, meaning that his skills will level up. All his skills are now able to target multiple enemies. If he identifies his enemies in his field of vision and uses a skill, they will all hit whoever he perceives as an enemy in his head. That is an advantage for him since he doesn't have to wreck his voice repeatedly chanting spells one by one to hit a single enemy. But a bigger advantage is that turning large amounts of monsters into experience points has become easier. The only downside is that Memori can't do anything when he gets attacked in his blind spot, so he has to always stay vigilant. That's why he developed a sixth sense, and suddenly, he felt a shiver behind his neck implying he was in danger. He dodges the attack of an undead dragon thinking that Vices wasn't really going to let Memori survive in one piece. He decides whether he should use his skills on a large-scale monster. But Memori decides to risk it and thinks to himself that if his skills don't work he will instantly die, but if they do, he will turn the dragon into his own guinea pig. Before the battle begins, another flashback starts, and we see Memori talking to his classmate named Kashima. She talked to him about an injured stray cat that she found outside. She compliments Memori saying that he's a brave person since he brought the cat to the vet, unlike her who's a coward. Memori tells her that it's fine to be a kind coward rather than a scary maniac. The next scene is about Kashima's present. She is confronted by a group of girls who are bullying her into doing a rehearsal. The girl swirling the pen tells Kashima to call them by their first names instead of their last names. Kashima rehearsed it again. It was about them trying to work as a group because the C rankers couldn't keep up with the S rankers. Her classmate told her that she did a good job. Her classmate, who is AB rank, decides to take charge to be a leader. She then suddenly rips off Kashima's clothes, revealing her exposed self, and she falls to her knees. Her classmate tells her that they've already persuaded the girls to overthrow the system of the class and tells Kashima to gather as many stupid guys as she can to become their meat shields. Kashima asked her the reason why, and her classmate told her it's because of an upcoming practice session on killing enemies. They have to gather more people before the A and S rankers leave them. Her classmate tells Kashima that she has yet to open her eyes since some of her classmates don't trust the goddess Vices, who suddenly abducted their whole class and tasked them with defeating enemies. She tells Kashima to leave it to the heroes who are motivated, and rather than getting banished like Momori, they'd rather have an organization where they can freely do whatever they want. She tells her that their class relationships are already a thing of the past and tells Kashima to get going and get some guys, since even she doesn't want to get killed by a monster. Kashima was scared thinking about Momori and wondering if being a kind, cowardly person was no longer good enough. Back to the present, Momori had already defeated the undead dragon and was currently experimenting with it. He reads the book that he got earlier from the old sage. The old sage's name was Anglin Berthrad, who was known as the Great Sage or the Dark Hero. He was also thrown away by the goddess, but for a different reason. The place where Momori was banished wasn't just a place to dispose E ranks, it was also a place to get rid of any people who the goddess deemed inconvenient. After reading the book, he levels up and proceeds to move on. Momori aspires to be a kind and cowardly person just like Kashima, but he is in the underground creating massive piles of dead bodies, unable to feel anything. He maniacally laughed while tears were pouring down in his eyes. After that, he continued to venture and saw a massive door. Momori opened it and saw a face buried in the wall with a stone on its forehead. He sneakily moves inside, trying not to activate the trap so he can extract the stone on the face's forehead. He wonders if it's a monster or not. Momori is currently level 1229 before coming up to the place. He also read the monster's behavioral patterns, so he came prepared. Momori slowly gets closer to it, wondering if it's actually a trap or a monster. If it's a monster, he can just paralyze it with his paralyze poison sleep combo. Momori's stamina is almost at its limit, so he decides to take action. He stands on the very edge of his casting range and prepares to cast Paralyze. The moment he starts to chant the spell, a beam suddenly pierces Momori's hand and shoulder. He fell to his knees because of the pain and realized that the monster he was messing with was the Soul Eater. Momori immediately hides behind a pillar to take cover and thinks about the monster's attack, wondering if it's a ray or a beam. He thinks whatever kind of attack it is, it's undoubtedly faster than him, and it will most likely shoot him every time he shows his readiness to attack the boss. Momori realizes that he messed up and actually encountered the boss of the labyrinth. He hesitates in battling the boss since he can't use his skills without saying their name at a certain volume, and he thinks that he should turn back for now and raise his level. Momori changes his mind and decides to fight back because he already wiped out most of the monsters and there are barely any experience points left to collect, so leveling up would be tough. He wonders to himself if he should give up clearing the labyrinth and decide to live in it instead. Suddenly, he remembers the goddess face and decides to push forward. After the moment of encouragement, the Soul Eater suddenly spits out pieces of blobs from its mouth and the blobs slowly change their form into humanoids. Momori then notices their faces. It was all the faces of its victims. They all laughed at Momori, enjoying his reaction. He had already seen these kinds of scenes many times. The boss then spit another set of blobs near Momori. Momori shouts at them to go away and backs off. He casts his Paralyze skill at them, but nothing happens. He notices that the skill did not get obstructed even though they are in the Soul Eater's line of sight. He realizes that the skill wasn't directed at its own body, and Momori becomes merciful, saying that he can't cast poison on the other victims since they're practically like his comrades. Momori tells the humanoids that he is different from the others. He can't tolerate monsters, but he will never harm any other human-shaped being that has gone through the same hardship as him. The boss smirks and Momori realizes that it's enjoying his misery as it laughs at him. The Soul Eater spits out more as they flock onto him and Momori begs for them not to come near him. He begs for someone to accompany, looking for someone to save him. The boss laughs at him again, thinking he was doomed, but Momori unexpectedly pulls out an Uno reverse card. He casts his spell Paralyze and everyone in his line of sight including the boss gets immobilized. Momori steps forward near the boss and talks to him, saying that all arrogant and strong people always make the same face, called carelessness. He mocks the boss, saying that he wasn't broken in the first place. He tells it that he spent days, months, and years for the people who treated him kindly just to play the background character Momori Touka. He says that he is used to playing the pitiful, weak guy, and so he readies his hand to cast his spell, Poison, at the boss. The boss' skin bubbles up, swells, and vomits an unknown substance, while the human-shaped beings suffered the same damage as well. Momori laughs at the boss while its face cracks and bursts open, making it deformed, because if an enemy under paralysis tries hard enough to move its body, it will receive additional damage. He engages in a conversation with the boss while it is dying and finally puts it to sleep. It wakes up again and Momori puts an end to it by using Paralyze. After killing the boss, he levels up and looks at his stats. He went from level 1229 to level 1789 while his skills leveled up from 2 to 3. Suddenly, a burst of magic flows outside the Soul Eater's mouth. It was the souls of the people he enslaved. A soul told him that he was so glad when Momori noticed the Minotaur back then and told him it was the right choice to take his mantle. While another soul told him that she felt refreshed after seeing Momori annihilate the monsters who killed her. The souls all gathered towards Momori with one person in a robe standing in front of him. It was the great sage, the dark hero, Anglin. Momori couldn't hear what he was saying, but he could understand that they were thanking him. They finally moved on to heaven and encouraged Momori to defeat the goddess. He tears up, and even if it might take quite some time, he will force the goddess to settle her debt. The labyrinth's door closes and he finally gets outside. On that day, a piece of information was spread throughout the continent. In the far northern part of the continent, it is currently home to numerous demons. The great demon emperor's armies have begun their march to the south. And the cornerstone of the north, the kingdom of Magnar's pride, the great fortress Nightwall, has already fallen, and then each and every country was forced to play their countermeasures. The kingdom of Alien, where the goddess resides, was also no exception. Rulers, conquerors, fugitives, and avengers, all the pawns have been assembled and an age of upheaval is about to begin. That is all for the part 1 of this manga. If you've enjoyed it, comment for another part, like, and subscribe. Love you all, have a good day and peace.